The phenomena of unidentifiable objects seen in the sky have been with the human race since the dawn of history. Although most modern investigators are more interested in searching for alien spaceships from other star systems, the answer to at least part of the UFO mystery may not be as easy or apparent. The late Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was considered to be the world's foremost authority on UFOs, once stated, "I would be disappointed if they all turned out to be someone else's spaceship from another planet." I believe the explanation to the total sum of the UFO experience to be more exotic. This is not to say that all, or even some UFO reports are not extraterrestrial in origin. But we must consider that a certain percentage of these encounters could be Djinn manifestations. The UFO experience is quite inclusive in its material, and it is our opinion that some sightings and close encounters are more phantasmic than solid and physical in nature. Many of the UFO saucers described by witnesses are characterized as being discs of light that change shape and have the ability to pop in and out of vision. Reports about UFOs such as these are more paranormal in nature and are often ignored by investigators because they fail to fit the alien spaceship theory. There are many close encounter UFO cases that involve contact with some type of intelligence that will often identify itself as an extraterrestrial, angelic, or sometimes the devil. It is in experiences like this that we should suspect an interdimensional being that is trying to cover its true identity. Islamic scholars describe the Djinn as glowing objects that can change their shape and at times take on a physical form. We have many UFO cases in our files that describe encounters like this. For years, they were labeled as high strangeness. However, when the idea of the Djinn is placed into the equation, these bizarre cases seem to make more sense. The witness, whom we will refer to as Sam, was a 30-year-old computer programmer at the time of the experience. On April 23, 1990, at about 10 p.m., Sam was driving home on Route 164 in Patterson, New York, from a friend's house in nearby Fishkill. This particular road is very dark at night, and there are no street lights and very few homes. As Sam drove along the dark, winding road, he began to feel uneasy, like something bad was about to happen. He slowed down and looked into the woods on both sides of the road, expecting a deer or some other animal to dart out in front of him. Sam often got feelings like this in the past, and on more than one occasion, he would listen to this inner voice and take the appropriate action, only to nearly miss what would have been an injurious accident or otherwise unpleasant encounter. On this night, Sam noticed a solid glowing object on his left, just above the tree line. The object was pulsating and was yellow-red in color. The lights seemed too low to be a plane and appeared to be several hundred yards away. The pine trees along the road partially obscured his view, so he continued to drive, but slowly. He came to a clearing and stopped his car and noticed that the object had gotten much closer to him. As he watched, the object moved directly over his car. Sam rolled down his car window and watched the object for about a minute or so. He decided he wanted to get a better look and stopped the car and got out. He sat on the hood and watched this object, which he described as about the same size as a minivan and about 100 feet above his head. The object changed in shape from an oval to a perfect circle. Sam reported feeling heat coming from the object as well. He was surprised to see 5 small figures gathering around the edges of the light, as if they were looking at him. He got the impression that this object was some type of window, and although he only saw silhouettes, he was certain they looked humanoid in shape. The object dipped lower and seemed to grow in size. Eventually, it became so large and low that it blocked all of Sam's view of the sky. The object began to move very slowly, and Sam was amazed that something of that size could move so slowly and be as silent. Sam's amazement gave him the sense that the object was not part of our universe and was peering in from another dimension. Then, something strange took place. The next thing Sam remembered was driving down the road, the object completely gone. He did not remember getting back into the car, seeing the object completely pass over, or finding the road again. When Sam finally arrived home, he discovered it was much later than he had thought. He estimates the entire sighting was under 10 minutes, yet the trip took him 3 hours. He had a difficult time sleeping that night and felt as if something was watching him from the dark corners of his bedroom. For the next week, he woke up in the middle of the night feeling very confused, in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. He sometimes knew these episodes of night terrors had something to do with the UFO he had seen. As the weeks passed, Sam found it very hard to concentrate on work and was fearful of going out at night. He felt the UFO was waiting to get him alone in an isolated place. Sam also said that sometime after the sighting, he would wake up in the middle of the night and stare into the dark. He said he felt as if something was in the corner of the room, waiting for him to fall asleep so it could come and get him. This type of fear is not uncommon in such cases. Many witnesses report feeling a personal connection with the UFO they see and feel strongly that some kind of entity is out in the night waiting for them to fall asleep so it can enter their homes and take them. This feeling may actually be some kind of psychic connection with this dimensional intelligence. For several weeks, everything seemed to return to normal. Then, one night, near the end of June, Sam woke up to find his whole bed vibrating. He looked at the wall across the room and saw a circular hole forming that was jet black. Sam tried to get up, but to his horror, he realized he was unable to move. He claims he was levitated off the bed and floated into the opening of some type of vortex. Sam then found himself lying on a table in a dark room. Several beings were standing around him. The one near his left side was moving some type of instrument around his head. Sam tried to move, but every part of his body was paralyzed. He described the beings as short, with gray skin and round eyes. As he watched, the beings all changed in shape to a glowing light, then into a form that horrified him. They looked like demons with long pointed ears and very ugly gargoyle-like faces. They inserted something into his nose and navel that caused him a great deal of pain. After the insertion procedure was finished, Sam was allowed to get up. One of the beings escorted him through a passage that glowed red. Sam got the impression that he was in a cave, but thought that perhaps he had died and was in hell. At no time was there any spoken communication, but Sam knew where the beings wanted him to go and what it wanted him to do. He was shown a panel composed of a grayish material that had many projections coming out of it, He looked around. Although the room he was in was very dimly lit, he was able to see a corridor to his right that led to another room. The being then looked at him, and he got a strong feeling that he was not allowed to go there. The entity who escorted him then put thoughts in his mind. Sam now knew that they were from another dimension, and he received information that they were once on Earth a long time ago, and were in the process of working to come back. Their reason was because unless they did so, their race would become extinct. Then, without warning, Sam found himself back in his bed. Sam believes the beings will come back for him someday, and when they do, he will not be allowed to return. His entire life has changed, and he claims to be in some type of mental contact with the dimensional entities. Sam feels he is gathering information for them, and what he sees and experiences is somehow being transmitted. Sam said that although the beings were hesitant to give him detailed information, he knows they came from a desolate plane of existence, and they envy us because our planet is so beautiful. The beings are angry that humans are polluting Earth, as they themselves made the same mistake a long time ago, and have no real place to call home as a result. Living here would be problematic for them, but they are slowly adapting themselves so that future generations will be able to live in our environment. Sam said these creatures have considerable trouble understanding our emotions. They consider us an immature race that is bent on self-destruction. He feels the beings are using him in order to understand humans and how we react in different situations. Sam is convinced the beings he encountered that night are emissaries from the devil, and they are out to destroy the human race and take over our world so they can live here. Djinn seem to take the guise of alien extraterrestrials to hide their true nature. This is not to say that all UFO experiences are caused by Djinn, but some experiences, like Sam's, may be ultra-terrestrial.
The following case came to our attention in the fall of 2007, shortly after Phil did a radio interview for a syndicated show that broadcast over most of Northeast America. It involved a retired man named Martin, who purchased a house in Holmes, New York. Martin's wife had passed away a number of years ago from a long-term illness, and his children were all adults, married with children of their own. Martin said he was ready to spend some time alone and continue with his life. His home was on several acres of property, and despite being built in 1830, was in pristine condition. He remarked that he was surprised he was able to purchase the 4-bedroom home, plus the land, at a phenomenally low price. The deal seemed too good to be true, and it immediately made him suspicious. However, the building inspector said the home was sound, so he went ahead and purchased it. After Martin moved in, he would discover the real reason why the house had so many owners since its construction, and why it was offered well below market value. Martin moved into the new home in the fall of 2006 and was quite excited. It was in a beautiful location and had quite a bit of room for a study, library, and workshop. From the first day Martin moved in, strange things began to happen. Lights would turn off and on by themselves. Objects such as loose change, car keys, books, food, and even furniture would disappear overnight and never return. During the night, he heard footsteps in the house, and unusual sounds he thought were electrical in nature. Doors would slam in the wee hours of the morning, causing him to jump out of bed in fear of home invasion. On numerous occasions, the faucets in the kitchen and bathrooms would be left running overnight and while he was out of the house, resulting in floods that damaged floors and ceilings. On more than one occasion, Martin saw shadowy images in the rooms and heard sounds like a group of people chanting in some ancient language he could not identify. One winter evening, while downstairs having coffee with two friends, they all heard heavy walking in the bedroom above. He told us it sounded like someone had boots on and was pacing back and forth. Martin and his friends ran upstairs to investigate, but found nothing. Objects such as plates, pictures, and even candlestick holders would jump off tables and fly across the room, striking him. Despite all of these events, Martin decided to stick around, hoping that perhaps the strange occurrences would eventually stop. He was sure the activity was due to an angry ghost that would eventually give up and leave him alone. But his mind would change after one night and one experience that had him packing his bags. In the spring of 2007, Martin woke up from a deep sleep at about 2 a.m. He heard the sounds coming from the next room, as if someone had broken into the house. He was very concerned because he was completely alone. The nearest neighbor was much too far away to hear anything. He immediately picked up the phone in his bedroom to dial 911, but was shocked to find the phone dead. Martin then heard the sounds getting closer and closer. He jumped out of bed, waiting for the intruders to enter the bedroom. He tried to turn on the lights, but there was no power. Then, 4 small, lizard-looking people entered the room, stood motionless, and stared at him. He said their eyes were reptilian, and their skin had the appearance of being dark, rubbery, and scaly. The 4 beings approached him. Being an ex-Marine, Martin was not going to go down without a fight. He grabbed one of the creatures, telling us its arm felt like a dead fish, cold and slimy. He took a swing at another creature. The creature turned into smoke, and his arm and hand went right through it. The creature then reformed into the lizard being. Martin yelled, "I'm not going with you." He picked up a lamp and threw it at them, along with everything else he could find, including a small hammer. The objects had no effect. They bounced off the creatures as if they had shields. One of the beings raised his hand, and a yellow light came from his palm. Martin was instantly paralyzed and fell back on the bed. The beings approached him and did something with their hands. Another yellow light appeared, followed by some type of instruments that materialized in mid-air. The next thing Martin knew, it was 9 a.m, and he woke up with a severe headache. He couldn't find any evidence of the nighttime visitors, but he was sure the previous night's experience was not a dream. 1 week later, nearly exactly the same experience took place, except this time, Martin did not get out of bed and fight. He awoke to find the beings enter the room and was unable to move. Having had enough, Martin soon sold the house, taking a loss on the property. As of the writing of this book, the house's new owners have not reported any strange happenings. They thought our inquiries were ridiculous, and they did not want to be bothered with such nonsense. The characteristics in the case mentioned appear to be more like close encounters with Djinn. Although many UFO investigators may consider experiences such as Martin's to be alien abductions, we believe what actually took place was contact with a dimensional intelligence. The creatures Martin encountered appeared solid, yet at least one was able to turn into smoke and remorph into a physical being. Also, the preferred appearance was reptilian. We like to note that the reptilian manifestations nearly always induce more fear than the beautiful angelic appearances. Perhaps this is the reason the Djinn choose to appear as such. Fear is a powerful emotion that generates a great deal of energy. It raises a person's pulse and sends the brain into panic mode. According to Islamic belief, Djinn can subsist on physical food and energy, although judging by their costumes, they seem to prefer the latter.
Our examination of hundreds of cases show that there is a dominant core shadow person experience. A person wakes up in bed to see a tall, solid black silhouette of a man in the bedroom. It may be standing right beside the bed, or in a corner, or in the doorway. The person may actually see it slide out of a closet, come in the door, materialize through a wall, or slide out from beneath the bed. It does not walk. It glides, and it moves incredibly fast. Its shape has the form of a human, with what appear to be legs, arms, a torso, and a head, without any features. It is as if a person's shadow is moving along the wall and through the room. The figure usually appears to be wearing a coat or cloak, and often a hat or something rumpled on its head. Again, there are seldom facial features, details, or colors. Everything is pitch black, or blacker than black, as many experiencers say. If the room is dark, the shadow person's blackness stands out against the darkness. It seems solid, thick, and with physical mass, for it blocks out whatever is behind it. Even though the entity has no facial features, the victim knows it's staring at him with great intensity. Said one experiencer, "This shape had the form of a human with what appeared to be legs, arms, torso, and a head, but there were no features to be seen. It was as if a shadow was moving along the wall with the shape of a human, but featureless. It was watching me." The shadow man radiates powerful hostility, anger, malevolence, and even evil. People usually react with great fear, panic, and hysteria. They scream, jump out of bed, and tear out of the room or turn on a light. Often, the shadow person disappears, sometimes into thin air. Other times, it slips back into the closet or beneath the bed, or melts through a wall or window. What at first seems solid suddenly has no solidity at all. In addition, shadow people are silent. They do not communicate, though sometimes people mentally pick up on an intention, as does this man, a repeat experiencer. There's this black figure, kind of like a three-dimensional shadow. It doesn't really talk, but it always makes its intentions clear to me. Well, not really its intentions. I'm not really sure how to explain it. The thing sends off vibes of pure malevolence. It's like evil incarnate. It always starts out the same. It's like I'm awake in bed, and this thing comes to visit me. It's usually outside my front door trying to get into my house. Sometimes it gets to my bedroom door, and once in a while, it makes it to the foot of my bed. Words cannot explain the complete evil that emanates from this thing. It causes absolute panic and terror, like it knows just how to get to you. The man said the shadow never physically harmed him, but the psychological and emotional terror took a heavy toll on him. Sometimes people feel paralyzed in bed. They manage to pull the covers up over their heads, or they squeeze their eyes shut. When they look again, the shadow person usually has vanished. When they are seen disappearing, it is like smoke or mist. Prayer sometimes sends them away. Sometimes they linger, much to the victim's terror. There are, of course, variations to these details. Some shadow people are much shorter, 3 to 5 feet in height. Sometimes they have facial details, usually red eyes, though we've received a few cases of white or blue eyes. Sometimes the shadow person acts aggressively toward the person, grabbing, sitting on, choking, or breathing on him or her. Experiencers have the intuitive feeling that the shadow person's breath is toxic. Said one man, "The suffocation felt as if I were pinned down. I couldn't move. I had the physical sense of weight on my chest. My shoulders were pinned down. It felt as if it was holding a pillow over my face, preventing me from breathing. Getting it off and being able to take a breath was both physical and spiritual. I was pinned down like from a wrestling move, with physical weight on top of me. I tried pushing, rolling, and thrashing about. I thought someone had broken into the apartment and was attacking me. As well as trying to fight it off, I was praying for my life. I didn't have the strength to get it off. Suddenly, the weight lifted off me, and I was able to see my attacker, the shadow image. It was so real that I checked all the doors and windows after the attack to see how anyone could have gotten into the apartment. Everything was locked from the inside." The following was reported to us from a man who once worked a midnight shift and slept during the day. He awakened to find himself under terrifying assault. At the foot of my bed was a shadow figure. This figure, as best as I can describe it, and I will never forget it, had the shape of a man. It was tall, as tall or taller than I am, over 6 feet tall. There were no details or features that can be described, clothing, facial features, etc. The color was the most unique detail. It would require you to experience it to understand. It is best described as blacker than black, without really having a true color. It was more like a void of all color, with maybe a hint of bright blue around the outline, similar to the color of an electric arc. Any of that blue I saw was only present as it faded, or more accurately, receded from sight. The event happened in the early afternoon. It started as a physical, and I believe, spiritual attack. The presence was trying to suffocate me. I remember trying to fight it off physically. Whatever it was well beyond my strength. At the time, I was 22 years old and in good physical shape. The fight lasted probably only a few seconds, but it seemed like an eternity to me. I fought it off with every ounce of strength I could muster, and prayer as well. It was one of the few times I was seriously afraid for my life. Whether it just let go or I managed to fight it off is still a mystery to me. I don't want a rematch. Other types of entities sometimes visit shadow people experiencers as well, though not necessarily at the same time. These are often small creatures, another favored form of Djinn. The following is one such case, reported by a woman who started having experiences when she visited a friend. The shadow person followed her to her own home and began appearing there. Then it was replaced by a creature. I awoke at approximately 3:30 in the morning. The room was completely dark. Across the room, to the left end of my bed, at the foot, in the corner, I saw what appeared to be a man, dressed in a black trench coat and a fedora hat pulled down on his forehead. It had no facial features, or any arms or legs, but somehow I knew it was male. There was a red glow like that of a cigarette near where his mouth should have been. He just stood there, staring. I felt as if I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis, I think, is the name for it. I told my friend the next day, and she reported she never had any sightings at her house before. I visited her a month later, and again woke up at approximately the same time of night. When I woke, I purposefully didn't open my eyes. I knew he was there, and this time I was afraid. I turned over to my right and quickly turned on the bedside lamp. There was nothing in the corner when I looked back. A month later, in my own house, 250 miles away, I awoke to find him leaning in the corner of my room, again at the foot of my bed on the left. The same night, my 14-year-old son, whose room is next to mine, reported seeing a man standing in his doorway. Interestingly enough, the shadow man hasn't been back to my house. Instead, I've been visited by a cat-sized gargoyle that sits on top of my dresser. We have collected other stories of strange small creatures. We have often seen and heard about what Rosemary calls the little gray scurrying things, cat-sized gray shapes with no definable heads or tails, and multiple legs and feet, which move rapidly along walls and up and down stairs. A ranch in Utah has become famous in paranormal circles, the Skinwalker Ranch, named after one of the dominant phenomena said to command the area. So much negative activity occurs there that owners left and sold it to the National Institute for Discovery Science. The story of the investigations at the ranch is documented in the 2004 book, Hunt for the Skinwalker. We stress that the interpretation of Djinn is our own and is not made in the book. In Native American lore, skinwalkers are evil, shape-shifting sorcerers who travel about very rapidly, especially at night. They cause illness, incite people to violence, rob graves, and can even kill people. The ranch is situated on land in the Uinta Basin, an area renowned for supernatural lore and activity. The ranch is said to violate skinwalker pathways, making it a particularly unlucky place. Locals either avoid speaking of skinwalkers or talk about them in hushed tones so as not to attract unwanted attention. We believe skinwalkers may actually be Djinn in disguise. Their activities and powers fit the descriptions, and humans fear them in the same ways. Activity witnessed at the ranch includes intense poltergeist activity, strange orbs of light that seem to possess intelligence, supernatural bulletproof wolves, dark entities, mutilated cattle and missing animals, large black triangular objects in the sky, other UFO activities, crafts or objects that glide around and land on the property, and sightings of the men in black. One of the most peculiar sightings was of an orange mass that repeatedly appeared in the western sky, seemingly a window into another reality. One night, the mass appeared in the nighttime sky, and Tom, the pseudonym of the ranch owner who sold the property, looked at it through a telescope. In the middle of the orange mass, Tom could see what looked to him like another sky. Through the magnifying scope, he distinctly saw a blue sky, like it was a window into somewhere else, where it was still daylight. Tom felt like it could have been a tear or rent in the sky about a mile away, and through the rent he could see a different world, or perhaps a different time. It was nighttime as he gazed through, and it was daytime on the other side. He began to think that the strange events on the ranch might be explained in terms of different dimensions, alternate realities, and such. Flying, fast-moving objects, including one described as black in color, were observed emerging from this hole in the sky. Tom became convinced that his ranch was the site of some kind of dimensional doorway through which a flying object entered and maybe even exited this reality. On another occasion, at night, one of the investigators witnessed a yellow light manifest on the property, which turned into a tunnel. A large black humanoid creature, about 6 feet tall, with no facial features, crawled out of the tunnel and walked away. The tunnel shrank and disappeared, leaving behind a pungent smell of sulfur. The creature resembled descriptions of shadow people, and sulfur could indicate its origins as subterranean, a preferred Djinn dwelling place. It seems the investigator, like Tom, observed an actual interdimensional opening, as though an unknown intelligence had thrown open a door in order to access our world. The investigators witnessed other phenomena, but were never able to capture any of it on camera due to mysterious malfunctions and destruction of equipment. It seems as though whatever was causing the phenomena played a cat-and-mouse game with them, another hallmark of Djinn. Some of the investigators experienced health issues while at the ranch, such as intense migraine headaches, which also is characteristic of Djinn. After several years of investigations, they had very little physical evidence of anomalous phenomena, at least no physical evidence that could be considered proof of anything. This was in spite of hundreds of days of human monitoring and several years of camera surveillance. The investigation was officially ended, but we do not doubt that the phenomena in the area continue. Similar activity occurs in the San Luis Valley, another hotspot, the world's largest alpine valley, stretching from approximately Villa Grove in southern Colorado to Taos in northern New Mexico. Since 1989, researcher Christopher O'Brien has investigated more than 1,000 reports of unusual activity, including UFOs and mysterious lights, cattle and animal mutilations, ghosts and hauntings, mysterious creatures and hitchhikers, shapeshifters, and skinwalkers, evidence of alleged underground bases, and encounters with devilish or Djinn-like entities. O'Brien received a report of a Djinn-like encounter from the police chief in Cuesta, New Mexico. In 1993, the police chief's uncle was driving home late one night from northern Cuesta, heading south on Highway 522. He saw a woman dressed in fancy red evening clothes walking alongside the road, and so he stopped to offer her a ride. She got into the pickup truck and said nothing, only staring straight ahead. The uncle turned to ask her why she was walking along the road by herself so late at night, and got a shock. She had goat legs and cloven hooves. Before he could react, she vanished right before his eyes. The police chief's story is reminiscent of the tale of the half-Djinn Belquis, the Queen of Sheba, reputed to have donkey legs or extremely hairy legs and feet. The phantom hitchhiker is a common phenomenon found everywhere in the world. It is often tied to ghost lore concerning a tragic death. A female is spotted walking along an unusually lonely road late at night. She accepts a ride and sometimes communicates where her home is. She always vanishes from the vehicle. These mystery hitchhikers do not seem dangerous or harmful. So perhaps the shock they give those who try to help is the payoff. West Virginia is an active state from a paranormal perspective, and the Appalachians are full of strange lore and stories about the supernatural. Some of the more remote mountains and hollows may provide ideal places for Djinn to exist with little human interference. We have seen how fiercely territorial the Djinn can be, and that when disturbed, they can react with great hostility. They can reside quietly in a dimensional intersection location for long periods of time. But if stepped on, they put on a display of power. Every year, Rosemary attends the annual Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where she gives presentations, conducts investigations, and mingles with festival goers. In 2009, she met a West Virginia resident who told her about a frightening paranormal experience he had in the field of his own farm with an invisible but palpable entity. Robert, not his real name, was inclined to interpret the entity as Mothman, but with due respect to Robert, we think a genie may be a closer fit. Interpreting paranormal experiences is often highly subjective, much like dream interpretations. People arrive at an explanation that makes sense to them. Robert's terrifying encounter began with a series of low-key, unusual phenomena in the early 90s. He and his wife would be in a state of deep meditation and absentee healing inside their farm home when the sounds of something heavy walking on the roof would creak the ceiling. Robert had an intuitive feeling that he was being warned off from going outside to investigate when these episodes occurred. One night, he and his wife had friends visiting. He stepped outside alone to enjoy the fine night air. It was quite dark outside. Suddenly, he became aware of an invisible presence standing on the ground about 10 to 15 feet away from him. The thing had faintly glowing red eyes, maybe 3 times as large as mine, spaced 3 times as wide. They were elongated, meaning perhaps twice as wide as they were high. They emitted a faint, almost infrared glow, which was in itself a bit frightening. The being must have been about 7.5 feet tall. I could not determine the shape or size, but it seemed massive. Robert rushed back inside, but did not say anything, so as not to alarm his wife and friends. Although the presence was unsettling, he did not detect any bad vibes from it. 2 years later, he experienced what he later described as the most frightening and stressful experience of his life. He was in the habit of going way out into his rear field on summer nights and bedding down in a sleeping bag beneath the stars. He took along his dog, Tanya, and a .38 revolver with him, in case he encountered any rowdy dogs. The nights were usually peaceful, and sometimes he saw UFO activity. On this night, however, things took a much different turn. Robert was almost asleep when he was woken up by a ringing thump sounding in the ground. He recognized it as a deer warning. When the deer are alarmed, they strike the ground with their hooves, and it creates a ringing sound that other deer pick up. Robert heard the sounds of deer very swiftly moving away from his vicinity. Immediately, his senses were on high alert. Suddenly, a strange and intense, strong energy hit Robert's body, unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was painful and penetrating and terrified him. It resembled a massive psychic attack, but hundreds times more powerful. I tried to reduce the effects on me, but my best efforts had no effect on the energy experience, or the physical, psychic, or emotional damage effects. I tried in vain to counter the attack. This was the most alien feeling in my life, and it filled me with unreasoning terror, beyond anything I had experienced or even imagined. I believe it might paralyze an average person. Tanya went unconscious, and the batteries in his flashlight went dead. Robert felt the source of the attack was about 50 to 100 meters distance from him and about 20 degrees up from the horizon. He was unable to see any form or shape. For 4 to 5 hours, Robert sat tensely, trying to ward off the attack, holding his revolver, knowing the gun was not enough for whatever was out there in the darkness. He forced himself to perform mental exercises that would ease his fright and stress. The malevolent energy maintained a consistent, nearly intolerable level, and he felt a genuine physical attack could happen at any moment. Then, when the first streaks of dawn lit the sky, the energy vanished as abruptly as it had started, and he was relieved when Tanya came to. That night was the last Robert ever slept outdoors. He also reported suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder for years. Perhaps Robert's land is inhabited by a genie who stays in the outer reaches, where it is seldom disturbed. His excursion to sleep out in the field may have finally irritated the genie, who regarded him as a squatter or home invader. It made a show of force as a way of scaring him away.